Imagine your former spouse subpoenas the digital security logs from your own gated estate to prove exactly how many nights your new partner slept over.
360 nights, to be exact.
Right, 360 nights. And they use that precise biometric data to legally terminate your maintenance payments. Welcome to the modern intersection of divorce, technology, and South African family law.
It's a profoundly impactful ruling. It forces the South African legal system to bridge this massive gap between historical precedent and the actual realities of our contemporary technologically integrated society.
Exactly. So in this deep dive, we are examining a pivotal judgment from the Western Cape High Court. This is the matter of RJS versus LAS. And we're analyzing a comprehensive legal review of this matter by Cape Town divorce and family law attorney Nick Elliott.
Yes, and Elliott's review details how evolving societal norms are, well, they're permanently altering the legal definition of cohabitation.
Which is something that affects a lot of people. I mean, if you are currently navigating a settlement agreement, or you anticipate doing so in the future, you must understand how modern courts interpret the fine print when your lifestyle changes.
Absolutely. What you agree to today will be subjected to the scrutiny of tomorrow.
Right. So let's establish the core dispute here. What exactly happens when a legal agreement demands the immediate termination of financial support if an ex-spouse starts living with someone else?
Well, that specific scenario forms the entire basis of the RJS versus LAS judgment. We are looking at a situation where a legally binding settlement agreement was executed upon their divorce.
Okay, and what were the mechanics of that?
The mechanics of this agreement contained a very strict stipulation regarding future financial support. The core of the dispute rests on one explicit clause. The husband, who is referred to as RJS, was obligated to pay maintenance to his ex-wife, LAS.
Right.
However, those maintenance duties would immediately and permanently terminate if she cohabited with a third party for a period of 6 consecutive months.
Wow, okay. And in the realm of family law, this is known as a dumb casta clause, correct?
Precisely. Historically, this legal mechanism was designed to relieve a former spouse of their maintenance obligations should the receiving spouse enter into a new marriage-like relationship.
The traditional rationale being that the new partnership ostensibly replaces the need for the previous spouse's financial support.
Exactly. That is the historical underpinning of it.
But looking at how these contracts are drafted, I mean, this clause functions very much like a tripwire.
That's a good way to put it.
It appears exceptionally straightforward on paper, right? You cohabit for 6 months, the wire trips, the maintenance ceases. In practice, however, how difficult is it to legally define when someone has actually crossed that threshold from merely dating to actively cohabiting?
Look, it is exceptionally difficult. And the precise legal definition of cohabitation is the exact crux of this dispute. You've isolated the primary conflict here between traditional legal precedent and modern reality.
Because what constitutes living together nowadays is so blurred.
Exactly. What does it mean in an era where couples may maintain separate primary residences, retain separate leases or title deeds, but spend nearly all their time in each other's company?
Right.
For decades, the courts simply did not have access to the kind of empirical data we have today. So they had to rely on tangible administrative markers to determine the true nature of a relationship.
Which makes sense for the time.
Yes. But the Western Cape High Court was forced to grapple with this exact ambiguity because the standard metrics of cohabitation were completely absent here, despite the couple's constant proximity.
So if RGS was not utilizing private investigators or, relying on neighborhood hearsay to prove his ex-wife was living with someone else, how did he actually prove they spent that much time together?
This is where the matter diverges sharply from historical norms. He utilized compelling digital and biometric evidence.
Which is fascinating. Tell us about that evidence.
The evidentiary submission was formidable. RJS introduced security access records from the residential estate, along with a meticulously detailed calendar to prove the presence of the third party, identified as SPR, at his ex-wife's residence.
And we know in modern South African residential complexes, access control is rigorous.
Very rigorous. It often involves license plate scanners, fingerprint biometrics, or digital access codes. This creates an indisputable digital footprint.
And the records in this case were so precise that they demonstrated the new couple spent over 360 nights together.
Yes, 360 nights.
I mean, that is not a casual dating arrangement. That is a sustained, near-constant physical presence. Yet, despite this undeniable digital footprint, the ex-wife's defense maintained that they were not legally cohabiting.
That's correct. They relied heavily on older precedent, specifically the Drummond case.
Okay, unpack the Drummond precedent for us. What does that require?
Well, under the framework established by Drummond, proving cohabitation traditionally required demonstrating a joint household budget and shared domestic responsibilities.
Ah, see.
So the defense argued that because LAS and SPR maintained complete financial independence, retained separate living arrangements on paper, and did not share a joint household budget, they were not legally cohabiting.
So they averred that spending the night, even 360 times, does not equate to the legal standard of a shared household if the finances remain entirely segregated.
Precisely.
But surely, relying on a physical ledger book in the age of digital banking is a flawed strategy.
It certainly seems that way now.
I mean, if a precedent requires shared budgets and physical chores to prove a relationship, but biometric surveillance proves they are sleeping under the same roof almost every single night of the year, doesn't that render those traditional markers completely obsolete?
You are looking at a legal standard that simply had not caught up to how modern relationships actually function. However, the defense's reliance on the Drummond precedent was not without logic from a strictly traditional legal perspective.
How so?
Well, for decades, the courts required tangible proof of an intertwined domestic life because, frankly, physical presence was too difficult to prove continuously.
Right, you couldn't just have someone stand outside the house every single night with a clipboard.
Exactly. The most measurable metrics of an intertwined domestic life were shared bank accounts, joint grocery bills, and the splitting of household duties. LAS's legal counsel believed that without those specific factors, the relationship simply did not meet the established legal standard for cohabitation.
Completely, regardless of what the biometric access data proved regarding their physical proximity.
Yes. In their view, the administrative markers were the only legal markers.
This creates a fascinating clash. The High Court is presented with indisputable biometric evidence of a shared life on one hand and a rigid historical precedent demanding shared grocery bills on the other.
It's a true modern legal dilemma.
But the court could not reasonably ignore the reality of 360 nights spent together, could they?
They could not. The court evaluated the evidence and ultimately rejected the rigid historical criteria for cohabitation.
Wow.
Instead, the Western Cape High Court adopted a holistic understanding of consortium omnis vitae.
Okay, consortium omnis vitae. That translates from Roman Dutch law to essentially a shared life or a partnership spanning the entirety of life, right?
That is exactly right. It implies something far deeper than just sharing rent.
So how did the court apply that modern definition?
The court ruled that cohabitation is not merely the sum of shared chores and consolidated money. It adopted a modern definition that includes intimacy, affection, and mutual support.
So emotional and physical factors over purely financial ones.
Yes, the court recognized that a permanent and committed partnership can entirely exist without merged bank accounts. A couple can be deeply intertwined emotionally and physically, offering each other constant companionship without ever opening a joint checking account or splitting a utility bill.
The court looked at the substance of the relationship over the administrative form.
Exactly.
Think about how wild that is if we look at the alternative. Because the judgment noted a crucial socioeconomic reality regarding domestic duties, didn't it?
It did. It observed that affluent couples may delegate household tasks to domestic staff.
Right. So under the old rules, if you were wealthy enough to hire a personal chef, a housekeeper, and an estate manager, you could theoretically live together indefinitely, never share a single chore, and legally claim you were not cohabiting just to keep your ex-spouse's maintenance payments active.
That is a vital observation by the court, and it addresses a significant loophole in the traditional application of the law.
It's a massive loophole.
If a couple employs staff to manage the property, they are not splitting the domestic chores, they are outsourcing them. Under the strict confines of the old Drummond precedent, one could argue they are not cohabiting because they do not share the duty of maintaining the household.
So the court is acknowledging that if you pay domestic staff to wash the dishes and manage the property, the absence of shared chores cannot be used as a convenient loophole to deny that a committed partnership exists.
Precisely. By addressing this holistic approach represents a landmark shift in South African family law.
It signifies the legal system adapting to contemporary affluent lifestyles rather than remaining entrenched in the societal norms of past decades.
It demonstrates a clear judicial willingness to look at the undeniable truth of a relationship. The sustained time spent together, the emotional intimacy, and the daily companionship carry far more weight than the administrative paperwork of a shared life.
Basically saying, technology has given us better tools to observe the reality of a relationship, and the law must utilize those tools rather than hiding behind outdated metrics.
That is the essence of the ruling on that point, yes.
But hold on. We need to examine the fundamental legality of policing an ex-spouse's personal life in this manner. Because dictating who your former spouse can live with and then using security data to track their movements feels like a massive overreach of privacy.
It does feel invasive, doesn't it?
Very. And LAS's counsel did not just argue the technical definition of cohabitation, they challenged the constitutionality of the dumb casta clause itself.
Yes, they did. And the constitutional challenge adds a profound layer of complexity to this judgment. The defense submitted that the dumb casta clause was inherently unconstitutional because it perpetuated patriarchal control over the ex-wife.
Their argument being that conditioning her financial survival on her romantic isolation was an infringement on her fundamental rights.
Exactly. Her rights to dignity and freedom of association. The argument is that maintenance should be based on need and the dissolution of the marriage, not used as an instrument to control the receiving spouse's future relationships.
It is a compelling argument from the defense. Using a financial mechanism to restrict a former spouse's future living arrangements reaches far beyond the marriage itself and governs their future autonomy.
It's a very strong philosophical point.
So how does the court justify the enforcement of such a restrictive clause against the backdrop of constitutional rights?
The court justifies this enforcement through the systematic application of a foundational legal doctrine. Pacta sunt servanda.
Agreements must be kept.
Exactly. This principle dictates that agreements, freely entered into, must be honored. The court prioritizes the sanctity of a contract agreed upon by legally represented adults. The South African legal system places immense value on contractual freedom, meaning individuals have the right to regulate their own affairs through agreement.
But surely that freedom has limits. I mean, you cannot contract out of your constitutional rights entirely.
No, you cannot contract into something illegal or contrary to public policy. However, the court noted a critical distinction in this matter.
What was that?
The settlement agreement was not forced upon LAS. It was a negotiated contract. Both parties had full legal representation during their divorce proceedings.
Ah, so it was an informed decision.
Yes. Therefore, to invalidate the clause after the fact would undermine the entire foundation of contract law. You cannot willingly sign away a right in exchange for a benefit, such as an agreed-upon maintenance amount or a specific division of assets, and then later claim the restriction is unconstitutional when it becomes inconvenient to your new lifestyle.
Because it disrupts the balance of the original settlement.
Exactly. The court's primary objective is to ensure the spirit of the original agreement is preserved.
So the court is essentially saying, you made your bed with your legal counsel present, and now you must lie in it, regardless of how your romantic life evolves.
Precisely. The judgment affirms that while the definition of cohabitation must evolve with the times, the enforcement of a freely negotiated contract remains absolute. The court will not rewrite a settlement agreement simply because one party now wishes to live with a new partner without facing the agreed-upon financial consequences.
That makes a lot of sense. So when we synthesize the key takeaways from this judgment, RJS versus LAS serves as a masterclass in how technological evidence is now fully integrated into family law.
Indeed.
It permanently expands the legal definition of cohabitation far beyond shared budgets and chores, recognizing the reality of modern, affluent relationships.
Most importantly, it successfully balances modern lifestyle realities with the strict enforcement of freely signed agreements.
Right.
It sends a clear, unequivocal message that the courts will look at the truth of a relationship, utilizing whatever modern biometric or digital evidence is available, rather than allowing parties to manipulate outdated precedents to their financial advantage.
Which brings us back to why this matters directly to you. The definitions within legal contracts are not static entities. They evolve alongside our technology, our wealth, and our societal norms.
That is the ultimate takeaway here.
What you sign today will be judged by the technological realities of tomorrow. A settlement clause drafted 10 years ago regarding cohabitation is now subjected to the rigorous scrutiny of today's biometric security logs and access control systems.
It is a sobering reminder that the law is a living instrument, and the evidence used to enforce it is advancing rapidly.
Absolutely. So we will leave you with this. If courts are now willing to use biometric data and digital security records from our residential estates to legally define the intimacy of our relationships, how will future settlement agreements need to be drafted to explicitly protect the digital privacy of our own homes?